So what's in ESS BIZGrants and what are we going to discuss today? We're going to have an overview of what ESS BIZGrants is all about, how it works. We're going to look at some of the reports that are produced by ESS BIZGrants and give you some ideas as to how you may be able to use those grants to offer a very proactive service to your clients. So that when we go onto the site, we'll show you a client profile. It takes about 6 minutes to enter the data in the client profile. We are using cloud technology, so you need to decide whether you're going to use the name of the client or allocate them a registration number. That's obviously your decision. And after you've done that, we're going to then look at what can be produced. There is a potentially eligible grants report. We're going to look at the grant toolkit, which is where we have papers and other information on a particular grant so you can supply the information to your client. There is a direct link for every grant to the appropriate government department that handles that grant, so that you can go direct to log on if you wish, and so you can have a look at the actual application form. So we're going to go on to the website and we're going to talk about your investment. Now your investment's at a discounted rate at present of $450 plus GST, so that will give you a total cost of $495 including GST for 24/7 access to ESS BIZGrants for a 12-month period. That's access to your office, so you can have any number of authors you like. So it's a quick and easy solution to find government grants for individual small medium enterprises. We were looking for something that accountants could use to offer some value-added services to their clients. In the first instance, to assist small medium enterprises to find grants that they may be eligible for. There is a spin-off for accountants, in that some of the work that is funded by various government departments is work that accountants can perform. So if you're comfortable undertaking that work, and obviously if your client agrees, well, you could possibly receive a contract to undertake part of the work, especially in the Enterprise Connect and the Commercialization Australia grants. So I've just showed you who's behind this. Obviously it's ESS BIZTOOLS. We've been producing material for accountants for the last 10 years, and the software is being developed by Real Advantage Solutions. So what we're looking for to go into the profile is some information about the client, and there's 20 initial questions that are asked. We want to know the corporate structure, because whilst government grants are available for a range of structures, undoubtedly the most common one that's been selected by the various government agencies throughout Australia is a company. We need to know turnover, because some government grants have got minimum turnovers, maximum turnovers, and some don't even mention turnover. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, therefore we've got to inquire about turnover. Employee numbers also come into play, particularly in some of the state government grants around Australia. Many of them have got minimum number of employees or maximum number of employees that a particular grant may apply for. Location's important, because in some of the grants they are targeted at specific locations. Our system includes a request for expenditure. It's primarily because Enterprise Connect, which is arguably the largest numeric number of grants issued in Australia for small medium enterprises, has this concept of saying that you can be eligible if you meet a targeted revenue figure or the same figure as expenditure. It's really to cover a situation where a business may not have had much turnover, indeed might not have had any turnover at all, but has expended a considerable amount of money on research and development, pilot plant development, patent attorneys' fees, research into intellectual property, etc. Exports, we need to know if the business exports, because there are federal government and some state governments have got grants for exporters. Research and development, not only is it giving us a link that this business may be eligible for the R&D tax rebate, it's a lead into another major grant called Commercialization Australia, which will assist entities who have undertaken the development of new products, processes or services. The type of business is important because grants are designed by the government to be beneficial to certain types of businesses in certain industries. So that's the reason we're asking questions about all that. The first report as such that you're going to see when we go into the system is a list of possible grants. If you are interested in one of those grants as being something that might be suitable for a particular client, you then need to answer some additional questions, and if you answer the questions correctly, it will then upgrade that grant into the potentially eligible grants report. And from the toolkit, as I mentioned earlier, you can get papers and additional forms to tell you a bit more about that particular grant. So you would then use the potentially eligible grants report to obtain approval from your client to proceed. And at that stage, our recommendation is that you would be charging the client for the work being done. And there's a link to the relevant government department. So we're going to leave the PowerPoint slides and we will now go to the just bear with me. We'll now go to the website to get ESS BIZGrants. So we're now on the ESS BIZGrants website. I'll just show you a testimonial, a couple of testimonials that's there first. First one written by David Smith, the technology guru for accountants in Australia. David encouraged us to write this material in the first place because he was aware that many small medium enterprises were complaining that accountants were not doing enough work as far as they were concerned on identifying government grants. So if we go back onto the home page, you'll see that there are 8 case studies already prepared. You can view these as a visitor to the site. Just click on the name and it will go through and give you an overview of how a particular grant works. But we're going to move through and start our search. I've already logged on, so what we want to do is go into client profiles, and first of all I'm going to show you what's needed for a new client profile. So this is what I was referring to earlier. You insert your client's name or the reference number that you have given to the client. You need to identify what type of business the client is in. We need to know whether they export, do they import, because there are some grants for importers, number of employees, all the things that I was mentioning there before. Are they registered for GST? Are they tax exempt? Now, ESS BIZGrants has been designed just for small, medium enterprises, so it doesn't cover not-for-profits or charities. So if you answer that your client's tax exempt, you won't be offered any grants in the ESS BIZGrants system. And if they're not registered for GST, they're not going to be eligible for grants, because that's one of the eligibility criteria from the various government departments. Are you involved in research and development? And is there any concerns about the financial vulnerability of the business? Now, in the next version of ESS BIZGrants, we're going to change that wording slightly just to make it hopefully a little bit clearer. But that question is asked from a bureaucrat's point of view, a government employee's point of view. So they're not particularly worried if the debtor's days outstanding are 71 days and the bank wants to have a discussion about what's happening within the business. They're primarily concerned about the embarrassment that is felt by a government, and in particular a government agency, if within a very short period of having allocated a grant to a business that a liquidator or receiver is appointed. So you would virtually only answer yes to that question if the receiver is about to be appointed or the liquidator is walking up the pathway, sort of thing. If you do answer yes, no grants will be offered, because every grant has these questions about the financial vulnerability of the business, and if you tell the government department that you've got concerns about financial vulnerability, they basically will not approve a grant for that client. Now, we can't go any further at this stage because we haven't inserted any of the answers, but I started inserting some answers in a profile short while ago. So these are all profiles we've established, but we're going to go on to a business that I called River Engineering. And we want to go back so we can edit the material. So I've put it in, it's River Engineering Proprietary Limited. It's a company, they export, they're also doing some imports. I've said they've got 25 employees, they have an ABN, they're been operating for 9 years, they have a turnover of 6.25. Now there's a clarification of that question about annual expenditure. So we've identified that their annual expenditure is 5.85 million. Are they registered for GST? We're saying they are. They're not tax exempt, but they're involved in some research and development. And there's no concerns about their financial vulnerabilities. So that's who they are. So we move on now. So that's the initial questions you would answer. The next lot of questions asks us to identify what business that they're in. Now these are based on, sorry I shouldn't have done that, these are based on the ANZIC codes, Australian and New Zealand Industrial Classification. So we've selected manufacturer. You could have more than one for a particular client, and the other activity we need to do here is to select which industry that they're in. And we've selected manufacturing. Now if you're unsure, you can go on to the Australian and New Zealand Industrial Classification at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. That's a link direct to that website, and you can go through the detailed lists to decide what area a client's in. The address details, I inserted this theoretical business. Was in a street in Parramatta, and all we put in was the postcode, location type. I don't know why it said unknown. It should say metropolitan area, so I'll have to check that. There's always issues when you're doing live videos, live webinars, isn't there? But that's not going to change anything. The real benefits for location are in remote locations, which is basically the inland areas of Australia. So calling that unknown is not going to concern us, but I just don't know why it said that. Business and industry details, we have there manufacturer and manufacturing industry. If we click on search, we are going to get a list which looks quite big to start with. 36 grants potentially match this business profile. Now, there's quite a number of apprenticeship grants. There are 9 different apprenticeship grants in Australia, and this one is disclosed there's 7 of them. If your client was interested, when you look at this and you say, well, he might be interested or she might be interested in an adult apprenticeship, and what I'm now showing you is the process for any grant that's in the pending list. You can first of all click on and can read about the grant details. Now, this business has to be listed in the National Skills Needs list. So you probably don't know what's in that list. If we go to Grant Toolkit, if you want to check the National Skills Needs list, there it is there. So we've got about 110 different trades. Now, we've described this business as being a manufacturing business. We've got metal fabricators, metal machinists, plumbers could be working in a manufacturing business. So you will always get this type of list being offered to you if you've got someone in an industry that's potentially able to qualify under this National Skills Needs list. So we may have decided that the sort of job our client might be really involved in is a metal fabricator. So we could say, okay, we're going to proceed with this. You might say we'd like to read something about this, or the client might. So here's the paper on apprenticeship initiatives, which also has an addendum which has got the list of the National Skills Needs list. So you could print this up to attach to the report to show the client, so that the client gets a better understanding of what it's all about. And you might want to have a look at the funding details. So we'll just go backwards, and for an adult apprenticeship over 25, there's a grant of $4,000 paid at the 12-month point of the Australian apprenticeship. And you then, though, need to answer some additional questions. Is your business proposing to employ a person aged over 25 as an apprentice to upgrade his skills to level 3 or 4? So the skill levels are important in an occupation listed on the National Skills List. Now at this stage, you just see what we've got up here, that's all we've been shown. Additional criteria is the last question. If we answer yes, the system has now added apply now, and the status has been changed to potentially eligible. So we could go on and look at apply now, and that URL there is for the Australian apprenticeship. So if we click there, we will get details of Australian apprenticeships. It's not quite an application at this stage, but that will give you the details. And if we want to go back to results, what the system has now done is if we go to potentially eligible, the gremlins are out today, I'm afraid. I don't know what's going on there. We should have that grant coming up as being potentially eligible. My apologies for this. Go back to pending, and we'll see if we can get another one that will work properly. We've listed in here Australian Bureau of Statistics. Whilst there's no money passes hands for that grant, it's free material. It used to cost businesses a lot of money. I'm just going to pick out some of these grants now that you might be just interested. Australian Technology Showcase is a joint venture between the New South Wales and Queensland governments. Because this business showed that it was doing research and development work, the Australian Technology Showcase is potentially a grant that they might be interested in. Certain inputs to manufacturers, we indicated that this business was importing goods into Australia. So what they can get is the duty-free entry of eligible goods. They have to apply for them through the Customs Department. There is a paper in the toolkit which will show you how that works. If we go to additional criteria, there are a few questions. Does the business import raw materials, immediate goods that satisfy these requirements? And you're obviously going to have to talk to the client about some of these because these are a bit technical, but we can't help that. We say, yeah, well, they do that. Will the application be lodged before the goods are imported? So obviously they've got to lodge with Customs Department before they import those goods. We say, yeah, they'll do that. We'll make sure they do that. Will the imported products have a substantial and demonstrable performance advantage over those produced in Australia? We'll say yes. And will the goods subject generate a quantifiable significant benefit to Australian competitiveness? Good typical government wording, but say yes. And what this has now done is shown we are eligible for that grant. We could go to the apply now, which will take us to the department. We'll go back to results. And it's worked here, so we're getting the potentially eligible. So for some reason we've got a gremlin in the apprenticeship grants, which obviously I'll have to check when we get off air. But these things happen, unfortunately. So we go back to pending. So we've identified one grant that we might want to bring to the client's attention. Clean technology innovation is a potential grant. This is an Enterprise Connect grant. Manufacturers could be working in the clean technology space. And just so you get an example of how groups can work, a business can enter into a group with other businesses. And the minimum expenditure, the minimum expenditure or revenue is $1 million, the minimum, for a member of the group. And the minimum turnover for the group's got to be $4 million. So you could have 4 businesses, $1 million each. They can each secure $20,000 as a grant. They have to match it. So if you had 4 of them, you'd have $80,000 in a grant and $80,000 in their contribution, $160,000 to spend for something related to the group to improve their overall business performance. It's a very interesting area. A lot of people don't realise that Enterprise Connect also applies to groups. There's a great opportunity for accountants to help put together a network of businesses to, or a supply chain network to undertake joint ventures, whatever you want to call it. So if we go back to results, I was just showing you that one to get you an idea of how it worked. There are clean technology grants. Now these are the federal government's new grants announced in the last 12 months. If we go on and have a look at those, they are a little bit complicated, but there's grants in this one from $500,000 to $1.5 million. So I'm just showing you that so that you get an idea that these grants are existing. There is that's the one I was looking for because we're talking about a small business. So there is grant of up to $500,000 clean technology. So this one's in turnover under 100 million. So there are different turnover levels, and at this level the grant is $1 for dollar. So it's 50%. So if you've got clients who are working in the clean technology space, there are grants there for them, and some of them can be quite large amounts. Now, this business may have been a clothing manufacturer. Unfortunately, the government regulations say manufacturer. Now, we know that we've decided that this business is a... No, we don't. I don't suppose I've told you that. I was just assuming it was a steel manufacturer. I've only clicked manufacturer. So if you clicked on to the clothing and textile area, there are innovative grants for businesses that are operating in the clothing and textile areas. So you would only come in and look at this grant if you knew that your client was in that clothing and household textile type industry. If they weren't, you would ignore it, which is really what I was going to do, and I thought, well, perhaps the business may apply to that type of industry. There are continuous improvement programs for businesses that have previously undertaken a Enterprise Connect review and undertaken some work already. They can obtain a grant of $20,000 to do further activities. Now, a manufacturer ends up being potentially eligible under a number of different industries, and that's why this grant has come up on a number of occasions. The early stage commercialization is an interesting grant. It's part of Commercialization Australia. It's for a business that has undertaken some product development and wishes to commercialize it. The grants are quite large, from $50,000 to $2 million. You would be amazed, there are quite a large number of businesses being approved under this category and receive grants of $1.7 million. In the grant toolkit, we have the eligibility checklist for that grant. And we have the papers on the grant, and then there are some additional questions that you could work your way through if you thought the client may have been interested in that particular grant. Now, we go back to pending. I am looking for some grants in particular. So, the Export Market Development Grant, you remember that we indicated in the profile that this business was an exporter. So we are therefore potentially eligible for the Export Market Development Grant. Funding is from $10,000 to $150,000 on a 50% basis of the eligible expenditure. In the toolkit, we have a paper on the Export Market Development Grant and a list of eligible expenditure, which is quite detailed. So you might get through that and say, oh, okay, the client does undertake all this. We could then answer some additional criteria. Have you spent money to seek out and create demand? You say, as far as you know, that's what the client's doing. You may do this exercise with the client sitting in front of you if you wanted to. Are you claiming overseas representation, or have you maintained documentary evidence? So you need to read the questions and perhaps check with the client. Are you claiming expenses under marketing? Have you maintained full records and cost summaries? In other words, diaries? Yes. If you've claimed 2 export market development grants in prior year, have you discussed with Austrade the export performance test? So after you get into you've already claimed 2, you have to start going through what Austrade call an export performance test, and we'll say, yeah, we believe the client's done that. Will the business spend more than $20,000 in this current year, 12-13, which obviously finishes in a very short time? But they also have this concept of a first-time claimant, and that can be over a 2-year period to get the expenditure above the $20,000. It's a great way to get them underway. So we're saying if in 11-12 and 12-13 they spent more, let's say yes. And is the business the principal? It can't be an agent that's applying for this, so we say yes. And if we wanted to apply now, that would take us to the Austrade website where we could register, and we won't do that, that takes a little while, so we go back to results and into potentially eligible, and we now have 2 grants. Obviously we should have 3, but we'll worry about that apprenticeship one later. So, and we'll just pick out one more to just give you an idea how all this is working. We'll get beyond this. We've looked at these. I've got in my mind that this manufacturer is in the steel industry, so we won't worry looking at food manufacturers, but there are grants there for food manufacturers. Manufacturing also includes printing, so you could have printing come up and you say, no, this client's not into printing, but they may be interested. We looked a little earlier on Commercialization Australia, early stage commercialization, but the more interesting one I think for a lot of your clients could well be the Skills and Knowledge, which is a grant of up to $50,000 on an 80% basis. So there's the funding details, and in the grant toolkit it will tell you what is covered, and basically what's covered is the preparation of market research, intellectual property searches, patent attorney fees, and budgets, cash flow forecasts, business plans, training and being able to make a commercial presentation. A fair bit of that work could be done by accountancy firms if you're offering business advisory services. So let's just have a look at this. Does the applicant have the ownership or beneficial use of the intellectual property? We say yes. He's developed that himself. He's been claiming R&D for years. You need to be able to answer yes to all the following. Do they need the funding? Do they need it for the market opportunity? We'll say yes. Because these are the questions you've got to answer in the application form. Is the business interested in applying for that? We'll say yes. The group turnover has to be under $10 million, so there's no minimum turnover for this one. In fact, the turnover may be nil. We'll say yes. And does the applicant comply with the obligations on the equal opportunity for women in the workplace? We say yes. So it's now telling us that we're potentially eligible. If we click on apply now, we have the URL to go to Commercialization in Australia, and then we'll go back to results. And then we go to potentially eligible. We have got these 3 grants. So what I want to show you now is the grant report. So the system has now prepared a report for River Engineering. The name which would come up there would be your name, the subscriber's name, not ESS BIZTOOLS. And what you are getting is a synopsis of what the grant's about. Whether it's the imports benefit where they avoid having to pay import duty. The export market development grant just summarises what it is. The deadline actually for applications is not the 30th of November, that's a Saturday, so it's the 2nd of December this year. And the specialist advice, which is spelling out what that grant is. There is a disclaimer on the bottom which protects yourselves and also ESS BIZTOOLS, because no one is guaranteeing the client is going to receive that grant. There may be reasons why the governments will not approve a grant to that particular client. So that is what the grant report looks like, and that is how this system operates.